Ladies and gentlemen, we all live with the quiet understanding that life is finite. For many of us, this is a fact we keep in the background, until the moment it steps into our homes, our families, or even our reflections in the mirror. The elderly, those who have walked life's long road, often carry signs, not just of aging, but of nearing their final chapter. And while death is not a subject we eagerly bring to the dinner table, what if I told you that certain signs, subtle, observable, and often misunderstood, begin to emerge as early as 1 year before someone passes? Now, imagine this: an old man who was once full of stories now falls silent more often than not. His appetite disappears, and the sparkle in his eye seems to have dimmed. His hands tremble more than usual, and his once purposeful steps have become unsure, almost as though each footfall is a question. Is this the last? That man could be someone's grandfather, a retired teacher, a soldier who once marched into war, or he could be someone you know right now. In ancient traditions across cultures, the last year of life was not viewed with fear, but with heightened sensitivity. Elders were watched carefully for shifts in behavior, energy, and spirit. Their communities didn't just focus on medical decline, but on subtle patterns: what the eyes said when the mouth was quiet, what silence revealed when no words were needed. Today, science and spirituality converge in curious harmony to help us understand that dying, too, is a process, gradual, poetic, and strangely predictable. This speech is not meant to be morbid. It is not about hopelessness, and it is certainly not about giving up. It is about noticing, about presence, about offering deeper care when care is needed the most. If we are attentive, there is a tremendous opportunity to provide peace, closure, and dignity in someone's final stretch of life. But we can only do that if we see the signs and understand what they mean. Now, let me be absolutely clear. These signs are not guaranteed predictors. But when several of them begin to appear together and consistently, they often signal that the body, the mind, and the spirit are entering a final transition. Today, we'll explore 5 signs that commonly show up a year before death, not as warnings, but as invitations to reconnect, to comfort, to honor. These insights come from ancient practices, modern hospice care, and first-hand observation across decades of end-of-life support. And they offer a rare gift, the chance to prepare, not with fear, but with love. As we reflect on these signs, let us remember, death does not arrive like a thief in the night for most elderly individuals. It arrives slowly, thoughtfully, often silently, like autumn creeping through a summer forest. Leaves don't fall all at once. They begin to fade in color, to curl at the edges, to detach gently from their branches. In the same way, the human body and spirit begin their gradual transition from life to what lies beyond. Recognizing the signs doesn't mean we're giving in. It means we are tuning in. When we begin to observe withdrawal, not just from conversations, but from joy. When fatigue moves beyond tiredness into deep, persistent exhaustion. When meals become ritual without appetite. These are not just signs of physical decline. They are signals of an internal closing of chapters. You see, most of us have been taught to look for emergencies, for crises, for alarms, but rarely do we consider that death might come wrapped in quiet gestures, less movement, softer speech, more silence. We are not here to fight death, but to understand life's closing act so that we might better honor it. The reason it's so important to learn these signs is not just for those nearing the end, but for us. For the caregivers, the children, the neighbors, the friends. When we recognize these signs, we shift from reacting to preparing. We shift from denial to presence. We begin to ask the right questions, say the right things, and offer the kind of love that is felt, not just remembered. And so, the question we should be asking ourselves is not how can we stop death, because we cannot. The better question is, how can we help someone die with peace, clarity, and love? There's a powerful transformation that happens when we are present in someone's final year, not hovering over them with fear, but walking beside them with reverence. We learn to appreciate every blink, every breath, every laugh, even the silence. That year becomes a canvas of meaning, and we, if we're attentive, become artists of care, compassion, and closure. In the end, the greatest tragedy is not death itself. It is a death without dignity, without understanding, without preparation. By paying attention to the signs, we are not predicting an end. We are preparing for a sacred transition, one that deserves more than just medical attention. It deserves humanity. So, let us become observers, listeners, and gentle companions. Because the final year of life, when seen through this lens, isn't only about endings. It is about making every moment matter more than ever. In the twilight of life, long before the body begins to surrender in visible ways, the spirit often starts its own quiet retreat. One of the earliest and most telling signs that an elderly person may be approaching the final year of their life is a gradual withdrawal from social and emotional engagement. It does not happen all at once. It is not dramatic. It is not a single day when someone wakes up and chooses silence. Rather, it unfolds over time, often unnoticed until someone looks back and realizes that something or someone has been slowly fading. At first, it may look like simple tiredness. The elderly person may stop attending regular gatherings or no longer initiate conversations. Phone calls go unanswered, visits are politely declined, and when you do speak with them, something has changed. They may smile, nod, even listen, but there's a distance in their gaze, as if they are looking beyond you, or perhaps beyond this world entirely. They are present, but not fully. Their laughter doesn't quite reach the eyes. Their voice lacks the curiosity or concern it once held. If you're observant, you'll notice that the stories they once told so freely are no longer shared. The jokes, the memories, the light-hearted arguments, they become fewer and farther between. In many ways, this withdrawal is the soul's quiet preparation for departure. The threads that connect a person to this world begin to loosen. The emotional investment in everyday life, family events, news, holidays, even food, diminishes. They are not bitter, necessarily. They are not depressed in the clinical sense, although the line can be fine. Instead, they are detaching. They no longer seek to hold the world as tightly because they know, perhaps intuitively, that they must begin to let go. Sometimes this detachment is mistaken for rudeness or selfishness. Caregivers or family members may feel hurt when their loved one seems less interested in what's going on around them. But it's crucial to understand that this is not rejection. It's not about people, it's about perspective. The internal world of a dying person grows larger, more consuming, more significant than the external world. While we rush around handling the logistics of life, they are contemplating something deeper: memory, regret, gratitude, and mystery. Their silence isn't emptiness, it's full of thought, it's heavy with reflection, and in this silence something sacred is taking place. One of the most poignant aspects of this emotional withdrawal is how it alters relationships. A grandfather who once adored storytelling may now fall quiet during family dinners. A grandmother who used to offer advice now merely listens with a faraway smile. Children and grandchildren might try to reignite the spark by sharing photos or stories, only to find that the responses are mild or absent. It's painful, especially when you want to feel close to someone in their final months. But often, the most profound connection we can offer in such moments is not words, but presence, sitting with them, holding their hand, breathing beside them without asking them to be more animated than they are able to be. Because what looks like withdrawal may actually be a form of inner concentration, a gathering of self before departure. There are also subtle changes in emotional expression. A person nearing death often stops engaging in conflict. Things that used to upset them no longer matter. Long-held grudges may dissolve, or conversely, old wounds may surface, seeking closure. In both cases, the person is less interested in the noise of the world and more focused on meaning. Some people begin to reminisce more often, even if they've stopped talking to others. They replay key moments from their lives, sometimes speaking to themselves, sometimes staring into space for long periods. This isn't confusion, though it may appear that way. It's contemplation. It's reliving a life before saying goodbye to it. In certain traditions, it's believed that the soul begins to unbind itself from the body long before the last breath. You can see this in the way an elderly person might gradually lose interest in things that once defined them: their hobbies, their routines, their possessions. A gardener might stop tending to plants. A chess player may lose the will to play. A lifelong writer might put the pen down and never pick it up again. To the outsider, these may seem like signs of depression or cognitive decline, and sometimes they are. But often they are signs of release. The person is loosening their grip on the identities they once wore so tightly. This withdrawal is often accompanied by a kind of emotional neutrality. People who were once highly reactive become more even-tempered. They are not as easily disturbed by bad news or excited by good news. Their emotional range begins to narrow, not as a symptom of numbness, but as part of a quiet, graceful detachment from the volatility of life. They may even exhibit a strange sense of peace or clarity, as if they've seen something we haven't yet. In hospice care, this state is often referred to as life review. It's when people begin to make peace with their past, to forgive themselves and others, and to prepare spiritually for what comes next, however they personally define it. It is important to note that not everyone experiences this sign in the same way. Cultural background, personality, and even unresolved emotional issues can shape how someone withdraws. Some may become more quiet and calm, while others may show bursts of emotional expression before retreating again. But the common thread is that their investment in the outer world begins to lessen. They are turning inward, and that inner journey is often the most profound part of dying. As loved ones, we can support this phase by honoring their need for space without abandoning them. We can speak less and listen more. We can let go of our desire to keep them engaged, and instead focus on just being present, available, and accepting. Sometimes the best thing we can say is nothing at all. Sometimes it is in the silence where the deepest love is felt. In the end, the withdrawal from social and emotional engagement is not a sign of weakness or despair. It is a sacred stage of transition. It is the body and spirit communicating a need for stillness, a desire for peace. When we recognize this, we can meet it not with fear or resistance, but with reverence. We can walk with them, not ahead, not behind, but beside, as they move from the noise of life into the calm before departure. And that may be the most meaningful companionship we can ever offer. There is a certain kind of tiredness that transcends ordinary fatigue, a weariness that is not cured by rest or corrected by a good night's sleep. In the elderly, this persistent fatigue is more than a natural consequence of aging. It is a subtle, profound signal that the body is beginning its slow journey toward final surrender. While many associate aging with reduced energy, there comes a point when the fatigue shifts. It stops being a byproduct of age and becomes a symptom of something deeper, a quiet exhaustion that seems to emanate from the bones, from the very core of the individual. This is not the same as being sleepy or needing a nap after lunch. Persistent fatigue, in the context of someone nearing the end of life, is a deep and ongoing depletion of vitality. It is an unmistakable slowing down of the body, a consistent sense of being drained, regardless of how much rest is taken. Even small tasks begin to feel monumental. Activities that once were routine, brushing teeth, getting dressed, taking a short walk, suddenly require careful planning and leave the person feeling depleted for hours, sometimes the rest of the day. It's as if their energy reserves are not just low, but no longer being replenished. This type of fatigue does not always announce itself loudly. Often, it arrives subtly, quietly taking up space in a person's daily life. One day, they wake up and feel slightly more tired than usual. The next, they find themselves sitting more often, lying down a little earlier. Over time, this new level of energy becomes the norm. The decline is so gradual that it can escape the notice of family members who see their loved one every day. But for those who pay close attention, a shift becomes clear. Not only is the person tired more often, but their entire relationship with activity, movement, and effort begins to change. One of the striking features of this fatigue is its permanence. Unlike temporary tiredness, this state of exhaustion does not lift after rest. Instead, it lingers. The person wakes up tired, stays tired, and goes to bed exhausted, even after doing very little. And they know it. They often speak about it in simple, quiet terms. "I just don't have it in me today," or "everything feels like a mountain." Some stop commenting on it altogether, accepting this deep tiredness as the new normal, even though it signals a significant turning point in their physical resilience. The body systems, when nearing the end of life, begin to slow in almost every way. The heart does not pump with the same force. The lungs do not fill as easily. Digestion becomes sluggish, and muscles begin to atrophy from disuse. But all of these physiological changes contribute to one overarching experience: persistent, unrelenting fatigue. It is the body's way of conserving energy, of reallocating its limited resources to essential functions only. In essence, it is preparing to shut down in the most orderly way possible. This fatigue also has emotional consequences. People who experience it often begin to withdraw, not because they are avoiding loved ones, but because interaction itself becomes draining. Conversation requires energy, processing thoughts, remembering names, responding to questions. It all feels heavier than before. As a result, they speak less, engage less, and appear less enthusiastic. They may still care deeply, but the fatigue overrides their ability to express it in the ways they once did. This can be especially painful for family members who misinterpret the exhaustion as disinterest or even rejection. But the truth is far more compassionate. The person is simply too tired to sustain the engagement they once could. Sometimes, this fatigue is accompanied by changes in sleep patterns. The person may sleep for long stretches during the day and still feel tired at night. Sleep itself becomes fragmented, with long hours in bed but little restfulness. They may wake up multiple times at night, or drift in and out of light sleep during the day. It's not uncommon for dreams to become more vivid, or for the person to experience moments of disorientation between sleep and wakefulness. In some traditions, this is seen as the beginning of the transition between worlds, a thinning of the veil, where the soul starts moving between the seen and unseen. Medical science often struggles to quantify this fatigue because it doesn't always show up in test results. Lab work may look stable, vitals may seem normal, but the patient knows, and those close to them know, that something has changed. There's a difference between someone who is tired and someone who is profoundly weary. It's in their posture, their pace, the way they hold a cup, the way they sit down as if gravity itself has increased. Even their voice might sound softer, more fragile, as though speaking itself now costs more energy than it used to. Caregivers often describe this fatigue as the moment when the person begins to stop doing and begins to simply be. The drive to fix things, clean, organize, contribute fades. Even highly independent people may begin to accept help more readily, not because they want to, but because they no longer have the strength to resist. And in that surrender, there is a quiet dignity. There is acceptance, and though it may break the hearts of those around them, it is often one of the most peaceful parts of the dying process. What makes this fatigue so different and so poignant is that it cannot be fought. You cannot cheer someone out of it, nor can you push them to overcome it. The best thing you can do is honor it, slow down with them, match their pace, sit quietly nearby, allow them to sleep when they need to sleep. Speak softly, reduce unnecessary stimulation, respect their boundaries, which are now largely dictated by the body's reduced capacity. This kind of support doesn't make the fatigue go away, but it surrounds it with love and understanding. In many ways, this fatigue is the body's final lesson in humility. It reminds us that we are not in control of everything, that our physical form, no matter how strong it once was, will one day require our permission to let go. And when that day comes, we must meet it not with panic, but with peace. Persistent fatigue in the elderly is not merely about being old. It is about the deep and often silent work the body is doing to wind itself down. When we recognize this fatigue for what it is, not a problem to fix, but a message to interpret, we gain access to a deeper compassion. We stop asking the person to be more than they are capable of, and we start offering our presence in the quiet space they now inhabit. In doing so, we help make their final journey one of less struggle and more grace. As the body approaches the end of its life, one of the most visible and yet often misunderstood signs is a gradual but consistent change in eating habits. This sign may begin as something subtle, a skipped breakfast here, a smaller portion there, a bit of food left on the plate that would have been eagerly eaten in previous years. But over time, this reduced interest in food develops into a pattern, then a habit, and eventually a physiological state. Eating, which once served as both nourishment and ritual, becomes less of a priority and more of an effort. For elderly individuals entering their final year, this change often marks the beginning of the body's withdrawal from the processes that have sustained it for decades. At first, loved ones may not take it seriously. They may assume it's just a poor appetite for the day, a symptom of boredom, or a temporary upset. Suggestions are made: how about some soup? Just a few bites. You used to love this. And sometimes those gentle nudges work. But more often, they don't, because what's happening is not just a disinterest in food. It's a shift in the body's very relationship with nourishment. It's not that food has lost its flavor, though that might be part of it. It's that the body itself is no longer asking for it. Appetite, at its core, is a signal of vitality. It is the body's way of expressing need, of affirming its commitment to survival and activity. When someone is nearing the end of life, that signal fades. The body's systems begin to prioritize energy for core functions and digestion. Complex energy, intensive and unnecessary for a body that is no longer building or exerting, is gradually scaled back. The stomach produces fewer digestive enzymes. The intestines slow down. Hunger signals become muted or vanish altogether. The body begins to conserve, to simplify, to quietly reduce the burden of living. This reduction in food intake is often accompanied by significant and noticeable weight loss. Fat reserves, once the body's emergency stores, begin to be consumed slowly. Muscle mass diminishes, the cheeks hollow, the clothes start to hang loosely. What may have started as a slightly looser waist and becomes a visible transformation. For family members, this can be deeply distressing. Watching someone shrink in front of your eyes, seeing their strength visibly diminish, can feel like witnessing them vanish in slow motion. But again, this is not necessarily suffering. It is nature doing what it does when life is coming to a close. It is the physical world releasing its grip. Another layer of complexity comes from the emotional meaning we assign to food. Across cultures and families, feeding someone is an act of love. It is connection, comfort, care. So when an elderly person begins to refuse food, it is often misinterpreted as rejection of love, of life, of the people around them. This misunderstanding can cause frustration, even conflict. A caregiver might insist, plead, coax, "You have to eat." They say, "You won't get better if you don't eat." But the truth is, in many cases, the person is not trying to get better, not because they have given up, but because their body knows something we may not yet be ready to accept. It is not failure, it is transition. There are also sensory factors at play. As people age and move closer to death, their sense of taste and smell often diminish. Food may start to taste bland, metallic, or even unpleasant. Textures that were once enjoyable become uncomfortable. Dry mouth, difficulty swallowing, or digestive discomfort can make eating feel more like a chore than a pleasure. And so, the person may begin to gravitate toward very simple foods: soft fruits, clear broths, spoonfuls of yogurt. They may take just a few bites and then push the rest away. this is not a lack of gratitude or stubbornness. It is their body communicating in the only way it knows how, gently, persistently, clearly. Eventually, the desire for solid food may disappear altogether. The person may only sip liquids. Even water might be taken in small amounts. At this stage, the goal is no longer nourishment but comfort, a moist sponge on the lips, a few sips of cool juice, a teaspoon of something sweet that melts away. The process becomes minimal, symbolic, almost sacred. It's not about feeding the body, it's about honoring the experience. There is a tendency among well-meaning caregivers to push back against this decline. Medical shakes, high-calorie supplements, feeding tubes. These are often introduced in an attempt to fight the weight loss, to restore the appetite, to reverse what seems like a dangerous slide. And while there are cases where these interventions are appropriate, in the context of a natural dying process, they can sometimes do more harm than good. Forcing food into a body that is no longer requesting it can lead to discomfort, nausea, and even emotional distress. It can create a struggle where there should be peace. That is why the most experienced palliative and hospice professionals often counsel families to shift their goals, from feeding the body to comforting the person. Emotionally, this change in eating can create a mirror for those around the dying. It reflects the shift from doing to being, from striving to releasing, from holding on to letting go. It confronts the living with the truth that control is an illusion, that love cannot always be measured in calories or spoons. It asks us to love in a different way, to accept rather than to fix, to witness rather than to rescue. And yet, in all of this, there can be extraordinary beauty. Meals that were once routine can become moments of gentle connection. Feeding a loved one a few bites of their favorite dessert, sharing a quiet tea without needing to speak, sitting in silence beside them as they close their eyes in contentment after just a few sips. These moments, stripped of urgency and expectation, become intimate and sacred. They are not failures of care, they are expressions of presence. The truth is, when the body is nearing death, food ceases to be fuel for function and becomes instead a gesture of grace. It is no longer about survival, but about tenderness, about being with someone in the way they most need, not by demanding they act alive, but by allowing them to be as they are. And so, if we can release our fear of what this sign means, we can discover within it an invitation to meet our loved ones not in struggle, but in surrender. Not in desperation, but in deep, abiding love.